The year was 2002. Cartoon Network Studios had asked Writers Collective, an up-and-coming entertainment brand, Man of Action Entertainment, to write 20 short but unique pitches for a potential boys action series. One of these pitches by founder Duncan Rouleau was, at least according to him, directly inspired by the Bjork song Army of Me. The concept being, as pitch number 8 out of the original 20, that a boy would find a mysterious watch that turned him into one of 10 different superheroes. The pitch resonated with Cartoon Network executives, and with the help of character designer Steve E. Gordon, finalized an initial concept of what the show was going to be, and be named Ben Motherfucking 10. While writer Greg Johnson would later suggest the change from regular human superheroes into full-blown aliens, that base premise was compelling enough to Cartoon Network to warrant some kind of exploration. And even if it wasn't on the minds of the executives that accepted it, or the people who created it, that base premise wasn't entirely original. For you see, after the show debuted in 2005, and the creators were subject to the early internet's opinions on a children's show, many people started putting the pieces together on what they thought was a sinister conspiracy. An attempt by the comic book creatives who formed Man of Action to rebrand a DC property into an independent franchise. While the creatives behind the Ben 10 series were stated to not be inspired by it, the idea kept being brought up to Duncan Rouleau, something that inevitably made him, and me, ask the question, what the hell is Dial H for Hero? Dial H for Hero first debuted in House of Mystery number 156, in a strip written by comic book writer Dave Wood and artist Jim Mooney. House of Mystery was originally a horror anthology book that was neutered by DC due to the Comics Code Authority. So once horror was no longer endorsed by the greater publishing industry, the book simply became an anthology series featuring heroes like Martian Manhunter. Dial H for Hero was yet another go at an original concept in that anthology, one that could perhaps support the book in its waning sales. The idea was simple. A boy genius with a geriatric guardian is thrown by a robot owned by a criminal organization into a cave hidden within their small town, one literally named Littleville. This boy, named Robbie Reed, would find a mysterious dial-like object with an ancient language where the numbers should really be. After transcribing the ancient dial's language and translating it roughly into English, Robbie discovers that if he dials H-E-R-O, he'll turn into one of a stated 1,000 fabulous heroes that could help save the day. Robbie would use the dial 3 times in his debut issue, seemingly without a time limit, to take down the evil Thunderbolt gang and their leader, Mr. Thunderbolt. While Mr. Thunderbolt would swear revenge, Robbie knew that Littleville's troubles were far from over. So, the tween-age wonderkind vowed to use the powers of the dial for good, as he protects the people and town he cares about. It's a basic premise that runs on Monster of the Week plots, but the joy of the series, which was sometimes written by Bill fucking Finger of all people, is seeing who Robbie Reed turns into next, and if the next transformation will be the one that saves the day. Heroes like Giant Boy, Radar Sonar Man, Supercharge, Robbie Robot, Mighty Moppet, the Human Bullet, Chief Mighty Arrow, oh god, the Muleteer, which is an Omnitrix fusion, Don Juan, who has a magic sword, Balloon Boy, who's in the same issue as Muscle Man, Magneto, I don't think you can name him that right. Supernova, Riptide, Hornet Man, Castor and Pollux, the Yankee Doodle Kid, who fought the King of Curses. This is canon to Jujutsu Kaisen, I'm taking no questions. Velocity Boy, Who's It, How's It, and who could forget What's It? Hypno Man, who goes down like a bitch. The Hoopster, who has way more gadgets than he needs. Baron Buzzsaw, Sphinx Man, Viking King,
Not to be confused with Viking Prince.
Microbe Man, Living Whirligig, the Human Starfish, the Human Pendulum, the Human Solar Mirror, the Human Icicle. Okay, come on, that's just Iceman. Gill Man, Shadow Man, Future Man, who has cancer, King Candy, Strata Man, who's radioactive, Mr. Echo, Quake Master, and last, but certainly not least, King Coil. I love this man. There are hard and fast rules about the hero dial, the occasional timeout needed between transformations and external circumstances like a storm changing Robbie's heroes into stranger forms, but the book is trying to milk its premise as much as possible. Robbie Reed can turn into any hero in existence. He's even turned into Plastic Man. And unlike the limit of 10 per playlist the Omnitrix has, the hero dial is inherently more unpredictable. It has no definitive origin, and the book doesn't waste any time on setting that origin up. Rather, Wood and Mooney really want to entertain you, and are trying to at least endear you to the idea of Robbie Reed. A kid who does solve problems with more than just the dial, even if he does need the dial to be effective. When I said this kid is a genius, I mean that he's a genius. And even if he has friends and a crush that could use the hero dial herself at one point, his priorities always lie in the betterment of people's lives, making things and strategizing on how to stop whatever hurts Littleville, or Granite City, or Zenith City like some villains did a few times. Even if he has his own grandpa figure, he doesn't have a Grandpa Max that's familiar with the greater world, or a Gwen to balance out his ego. Robbie Reed is a real army of me, and even if one hero is gravely wounded in a fight, he can return to normal and be just fine. Though, Robbie's time in the sun wouldn't last forever. After over 15 issues of stories with Robbie and Martian Manhunter, editor Joe Orlando successfully pushed for House of Mystery to once again become a horror anthology. Though Robbie and the H-Dial would appear sporadically after this point, the concept of Dial H for Hero as a recurring, ongoing series would return in the 1980s under Marv Wolfman.
With their first run in Adventure Comics and their second run in backup stories between Legion of Superheroes and the Adventures of Superboy,
the Alien Force equivalent of Dial H that was much more focused in story, drama, and general lore debuted. In the New England town of Fairfax, new kid and general wisecracker Christopher King explores his attic with straight-A student and cheerleader Victoria Grant.
Chris's parents, who moved to Fairfax due to his detective father being transferred,
Had seemingly bought a house from a supposed wizard. And that idea was only confirmed once Chris and Vicky found two H-Dials in a chest. One being a necklace, the other a watch. See, I told you Ben 10 ripped this off! The box warned the users to use the dial for good, and to enact justice wherever they go. At least for an hour at a time. And though the two new friends would be thrilled to have these powers, the dials themselves would be sought after. New villains of all different shapes and sizes being created left and right by a man called the Master, all in the hopes of wielding the power of the H-Dial once more.
This version of Dial H is a lot more focused character drama, especially of the romantic variety, and is much more engaging moment to moment than something like Robbie Reed's home life.
Chris and Vicky have friends, rivals,
Classes to miss that count toward their final grade, etc. The Master, and I don't mean the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and the mystery behind them is a decent driving force through both runs this duo of heroes really have, and how it later ties into Dial H's original continuity is equally as fun. Turns out, the Master is Robbie Reed. He had used the H-Dial to separate himself into two beings in order to stop a supervillain, but both would lose their identities and interpret the idea of justice differently. The Wizard, also known as Robbie's good side, would save the day and create the new H-Dials, while the Master would seek his original half to steal the gifts he gave the new kids. The day would be saved once Robbie was returned to normal, giving his dial to the third kid of the group and Vicky's comic book artist love interest,
Nick Stevens.
Now with a watch, a necklace, and the original hand dial, the three teenage heroes go off into the day, hoping to continue protecting Fairfax and whoever does their home harm. Even if it didn't feel more real, Dial H evolved into the Bronze Age in a natural way. Especially with publisher Jeanette Kahn coming up with an idea to further drive engagement, and in turn, sales. What if you, a DC fan reading The Adventures of Superboy, could design a hero that Chris or Vicky could turn into? Or better yet, a villain for them to fight, with your name credited in the issue, as well as your age and general address. And it didn't just stop at characters. It could be outfits for Chris and Vicky, buildings they went into, furniture kids wanted to design. It was a natural evolution of the brand that gave DC a bunch of good designs to play with, including a character created by cult favorite sci-fi and horror author Harlan Ellison. So even if the following was small, Dial H's second iteration had its fans. Fans that wanted to see more of Chris King, Vicky Grant,
And Nick Stevens.
Then Marv Wolfman added them to the Titans. So according to New Teen Titans number 45 and number 46, Vicky broke up with Nick and got with Chris.
which does make sense given the two's chemistry throughout the series.
After the heat died down and the two realized they didn't need their dials anymore, Chris and Vicky put them back in the box they found them in and went their separate ways to college.
Chris would fall in love and get engaged.
While Nikki fell in with a bad crowd, and later, a cult. This cult would help her channel the powers of the dial without its presence, turning her into multiple heroes, as well as a yandere who won't take no for an answer. While Chris would drag the Titans into his mess, the two's respective dials switched hands, Chris vowing to stop Vicky in her deranged state for good. It's here in these appearances where the idea that the H-Dial can leave behind residue of powers starts to take form. Chris himself would be able to turn into any hero for an hour without the dial at one point, being dragged into the world of Titan's West as he got tested at Star Labs.
The irony of the situation is that Chris doesn't even save her in the end. It's Hero Cruz, a friend of Superboy on his team, the Ravers.
And the two don't even meet or reconcile again before the New 52. And it kinda sucks that Chris or Vicky don't get referenced in the modern day. They had two decently sized runs that were later expanded upon in a major team book.
Sure, the H-Dial would be thrown around during the 90s to people like the Legion's Lori Morning or Superboy's pal Hero Cruz, but both of their tenures with the Dial were also short-lived, more so than their predecessors, and their characters in already stacked team books. The question on fans' minds became obvious. When were we going to get an actual Dial H for Hero series that isn't chained to an anthology title or a pre-established IP? When were fans of that original run, or even the second, who were very much adults by the time the 2000s came around, going to get a Dial H story meant for them? Like how some people want a YA or darker Ben 10 series meant for adults nowadays, that same conceit applied to Dial H for Hero. The benefit for Dial H for Hero, however, was that relative obscurity as a DC title, one a creative team could stumble upon and reinvent like so many past DC properties. So, writer Will Pfeiffer and a gaggle of artists like Jose Cano, Leonard Kirk, Patrick Gleason, and Dale Engelsham brought Dial H back to comic shops in 2003 through the title Hero, an anthology with an overarching structure with multi-issue storylines surrounding key characters, all while Robbie Reed is reintroduced to the DC universe as a washed bum who, like Chris King and Vicky Grant, had absorbed some of the latent powers the H-Dial gave him. For him, it was precognition that made him seem insane, got thrown into prison, and through those powers, broke out of jail to find the H-Dial. The H-Dial has changed hands a lot since Robbie lost it, going from suicidal soda jerk Jerry Feldon to marketing VP Matt Allen, to Matt's unpopular schoolgirl daughter Andrea, to construction worker Joe Hamill, who gets trapped in a voluptuous superpowered body when he loses the dial, gets drugged and date raped by his former best friend, and rejected by his former lover, all before he becomes a stripper until the end of the series.
That's rough, buddy.
Despite the dated trans rep, this book is really cool. Not only does it take the lore of the H-Dial in its own direction, but it also has a really entertaining but twisted mentor version of Robbie Reed. It squarely takes place in post-crisis DC continuity, and occasionally takes advantage of that for some pretty unique visuals. Most importantly though, it manages to explore the many sides of what power means to people and the consequences of using it. Something that ties everything together in the end, and while bittersweet, makes for a satisfying conclusion. There was a New 52 Dial H series written by award-winning sci-fi author China Mayville, but due to retcons surrounding that series and it already being pretty disconnected from continuity at the time, I want to focus on the last in-continuity Dial H series that's been released. Mainly because I've stretched this Ben 10 comparison enough as is, and want to bring it back to a kid protagonist. A kid in a series that not only paid homage to every single iteration of Dial H before it, but also carved a unique path as one of the most visually engaging DC Maxi series released in some time.
Sam Humphries and Joe Quinones' Dial H for Hero is a 12-issue maxi series focused on friends Miguel Montez and Summer Pickens. Miguel is an orphan thrill seeker who's desperate to leave their rundown town of Devil's Canyon behind, as well as someone who has a lifelong fascination with Superman after he saved him from a head injury when he was 10. After being given the H-Dial by a godly empowered Robbie Reed, Summer steals Miguel's uncle's food truck Mayo Madness and helps him travel across country to find Superman, the only person the two believe could keep the dial safe. Especially when they have Mr. Thunderbolt chasing after them, both a callback to the original enemy of Robbie Reed and the Master from the Chris and Vicky era. Mr. Thunderbolt's plans are not only possessing the dials once again, as well as its three sisters, but to use the entire Omniverse as an H-Dial, granting every living being in the multiverse superpowers through the hidden dimension known as the Heroverse, the source of all superpowered goodness and the H-Dial's abilities. Now, the idea of if everyone had superpowers, no one would be super has been done before. Just like the idea of Ben 10. But it's the execution and stress of themes about legacy and what makes a hero that not only makes Dial H 2019 similar to the topic of this video, but expands on the base concepts Dial H set up all the way back in the Silver Age beautifully. Miguel Montez is a fun protagonist whose self-doubts drive the narrative, while Summer acts as both a great foil for his insecurities and a mirror as she delves into her own broken family life. Both of these characters are worth seeing use the H-Dial, as well as the many prior users Mr. Thunderbolt has found for his Thunderbolt Club, because of the development they get from using that dial, making for not just good character drama, but a great use of the premise that spawned this mini-franchise in the first place. Also, the art by Joe Quinones is bangers. Highly recommend this series for visuals alone. And yes, it does acknowledge the Ben 10 comparison.
While Miguel would appear in the background of the disaster book Titan's Academy with a fridged boyfriend for good measure, there hasn't been a single mention of Dial H since around 2022. Something I think needs to change given not just Miguel or Summer's appeal, but the inherent appeal of Dial H, something that people have come back to time and again to handle differently, even when at the end of the day, it's a franchise about a kid doing the right thing, no matter what power he wields. So even if Ben 10 wasn't directly inspired by Dial H for Hero, it's certainly similar in some ways that you can't ignore. And if you're able to, you can acknowledge the unique way it differs, and appreciate the franchise's evolution long before Ben 10 hit the scene. Either way, I hope this little bit of clickbait helped you appreciate a lesser-known DC franchise, because at least one of these 5 runs are worth your time. King Coil's the best transformation hands down, and thank you for watching.